In the year of 1945, as a result of the Allied victory in World War II, the land of Korea split into two sides, the Communist North and the Democratic South. Through this split, two vastly different countries were produced, each with their own ways of governing. This split proved to have an everlasting effect on both the political and economic statuses of both countries, resulting in the Socialist Communist North and the Capitalist Republic South. This is the exploration, encounter, and exchange of the two Koreas. At the Yalta Conference in February 1945, the leaders of the Allied powers, Britain, America, and the Soviet Union agreed to liberate Korea from Japanese imperialism, which lasted for 36 years. The Allied powers agreed to temporarily occupy the peninsula, Soviet Union in the north, and the UN forces, most of which were American, in the south. Political differences between the United States and the Soviet Union prevented the two countries from agreeing on a single system of governance for all of Korea, especially since this time period was of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and America, a war between communism and democracy. In the year 1948, the United States set up a pro-American democratic administration in Seoul under the leadership of Syngman Rhee. The Soviet Union responded by installing Kim Il-sung as the head of a communist regime in Pyongyang, which we know today as the capital of the DPRK. Both governments asserted their legitimacy and refused to explore unity, exchange ideas, or allow their population to have encounters with one another. The differences sowed by the United States and the Soviet Union, combined with conflicting views among Korean citizens, made for a volatile situation. By 1949, the United States and the Soviet Union had removed their forces from Korea. In an attempt to reunify the peninsula under communist rule, North Korea launched a surprise attack on South Korea with Soviet approval on June 25, 1950. The United Nations Security Council, without the participation of the Soviet Union, which had withdrawn its delegate to protest the exclusion of Communist China from the organization, formally condemned the attack.
Korea, United Nations troops push on in the cautious advance against the communists. An advance whose purpose, General Ridgway states, is not to seize ground, but to wipe out the enemy. The Chinese Red Army, fighting desperately in small isolated stands, prefers to give ground on wider fronts rather than join battle. And it's up to the infantry to clear out the pockets of die-hard communists.
The Korean Demilitarized Zone, a 2-mile wide border that, contrary to what its name suggests, is heavily fortified, encompasses the demarcation line that still separates the two countries even to this day. These two different political systems ultimately resulted in the development of two vastly different cultures. North Korea encountered communism through exchanges with China and the Soviet Union. South Korea, on the other hand, was influenced by cultural encounters with the United States. This led to South's exploration and encounter of democracy, which in turn allowed for westernization and the founding of a democratic republic in the South. North Korea, however, closed its doors to Western encounters completely, refusing cultural exchange, exploration, and diffusion. Exchange of new political ideas occurred between China and the North and the USA and the South. The exploration of two different political systems in Korea has clearly resulted in the development of two different views towards the world, in particular the West.
북한 사람들한테 제일 나쁜 사람이고 이 지구에서 제일 먼저 쓸어버려서 없애버려야 될 것이 아메리칸, 미국이라고 생각을 해요. 저도 그렇게 알고 살아왔고요. 군사복무 조기간 또 그렇게 생각을 했고요. 근데 나오기 전에는 그 생각이 조금씩 바뀌었어요. 세계 유일 초대국인 미국이 과연 북한이라는 나라를 어찌할 도리가 없어 못하고 있는 것이 아니고 북한이 미국과 계속 조우하고 미국에게 계속 도발을 걸고 핵위험하면서 한다는 그 자체가 미국이 무서워서 이러고 있다.
This heavily influenced economic exchanges through trade or lack thereof, as well as international encounters. Soviet Union, although not providing North Korea with military backup during the war, opened a gateway for the exploration of communism. The Soviets sent many specialists to help Kim consolidate power and establish a communist government while simultaneously training and sending thousands of agents into the South to establish communist organizations. These actions were administered to destabilize the efforts made by the United States to establish a democracy throughout the whole of Korea. In addition, Kim immediately began to formulate the Korean People's Army to develop a fighting force in case the political efforts to unite the two Koreas under common rule of communism failed. The Soviet Union provided the basis for the communist regime in the north. They didn't provide military backup as much as the Chinese did, but essentially opened up exploration of communism for the newly developing North Korea. Similar to North Korea, South Korea also encountered a powerful nation to help explore and establish a democracy. South Korea's growing capacity as an international democratic power was influenced largely by their encounter with the United States. As stated in President Truman's State of the Union address, the Korean War was a war on communism to prevent any communist influence on the South.
Under a foolproof inspection system, this is a concrete, practical proposal for disarmament. If the Soviet leaders were to accept this proposal, it would lighten the burden of armaments and permit the resources of the earth to be devoted to the good of mankind.
For the last 65 years, the United States has figured prominently as an important source of investment, technology, transfer, and foreign capital for South Korea. South Korea's dependence on exports for goods made the United States the world's largest consumer market its most important exchange partner. Moreover, the United States also became the principal supplier of raw materials and machinery to resource-poor South Korea during the early years of its development. During its first decades as an independent country, South Korea's policy with regard to Pyongyang focused on being able to repel another North Korean invasion in partnership with the United States. In addition, South Korea is no longer poor and authoritarian, but economically capitalist and legitimately democratic, and has proven to be a thriving nation through their own independent ways. South Korea's democratic society is unable to repress latent anti-Americanism in the same way previous authoritarian Korean leaders could. The original Cold War logic that inspired Washington's need to defend against communist encroachment has become more of a historical memory than a driving force. Through encounters and explorations of two different governmental regimes, the once united Korea was divided into a democratic state in the south and a communist dictatorship in the north. Evidently, through their different encounters, South Korea with the United States and North Korea with the Soviet Union and China, both sides were able to establish extremely different political and economic systems, resulting in their distinct universal standpoint that remains even to this day.